Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here, and I am joined by a guest who touches on topics which we don't normally really cover on this show, and he is the magnate of a new and emerging industry, and that is Abyssal trading. So, MurderDeathKill, what can you tell me about your EVE career before then? What brought you to the position where you could even start to think about trading this sort of stuff? What drove you to this area of the game?
Well, thanks for having me on, firstly. So, I don't have a history as a trader at all. I was a nullsec grunt for the old Northern Coalition and for SOCO and then NC Dot. And then I moved to lowsec and did faction warfare. I've essentially been a PvPer for most of my EVE career. But as sort of time goes on and I wanted to experience um, different aspects of the game, when the Abyss was released, that really piqued my interest massively.
It really got you interested though? Was it the procedural kind of generation of the layout, or was it just the fact that it was new and unexplored? Can you go a little more in detail about that?
Yeah, of course. In terms of, I think what got me really interested in it was my PvP history and the fact that these modules were going to completely break the PvP meta in so many different ways. So it was the modules I was really focused on, and leading up to the Into the Abyss expansion, I was really hyped to get my hands on some of these like broken warp disruptors, and combined with the bonuses of recon ships will just have insane ranges, and armor reppers that when they're compounded with resists and hull bonuses are gonna make for some like unreal stuff. So that was really my main interest in specifically the modules. The Abyss content is great as well. Um, it's really engaging PVE, which is, as far as I'm concerned, is the best PVE that's ever been released within the game.
Okay, and then so you got into the very basics of it. You started getting your hands on some of these modules, and what changed from there? What made you end up doing what you do now, which is run the largest abyssal trading Discord in the game?
It was the fact that I found it really difficult to sell my modules, right? Trying to, trying to get people to buy these modules, to see that these modules are available in Jita local, right? Among the spammers and the ISK, scammers and ISK spammers was really difficult. So something had to be done, and I created this channel, and I think I created it day one, like after that patch was dropped, and I think there was already three other active channels like trading these modules. But I didn't discover this until sort of maybe a few days into it. So some early aggressive member acquisition had to be done.
So can you talk a little bit about what the gap is that CCP left in this mechanic that makes it difficult to advertise or for people to find information about these modules?
Of course. So essentially, these modules are completely unique. Every one of them is completely unique. So there's no facility to put these on any kind of market. You can't see them anywhere other than the contract system, which as I'm sure you know, is a very old part of Eve, and it's not the most intuitive for stuff like searches and all that kind of stuff. So really, we wanted somewhere where people could essentially advertise their module and put a little bit of information with it, like the stats, basically the stats of the module. So Discord worked really, really well into that, with the ability for you to post images alongside your post, which essentially means all it takes is a screenshot of the module and the stats that have changed. So you literally screenshot that into the cell channel it goes, and people just browse and view from there.
Grew up organically around that after you kind of acquired the momentum of being the biggest place to do that in the first place?
Yeah, the in-game channel came first, and that was all we had for maybe 3 or 4 months. I think it was just the in-game channel, and it was, it was a lot of. It's all about numbers, because there were these other channels operating as well, which were trading places for these modules, and there was a few initial places trying to get into this, but it's all about numbers. The more people you've got in that channel, and getting those numbers early. So we did some really sort of hardcore inviting and and spamming, really, to get people into these into the in-game channel. Once that was kind of well established, and we'd run a couple of promotional events and stuff like that, the Discord sort of came very quickly around that.
So given that it's likely that some of the developers of this concept will actually end up listening to this, do you have any ideas of what could be done to improve the actual in-game trading mechanics in such a way that maybe one day your Discord might not be as necessary as it is now?
I've got a few ideas of how it could be done, but the reality is there's just so many variables. There's too many variables, right? Every module has at least 3 completely variable statistics that could range with thousands of different data points on them due to the increments of improvement or non-improvement, or the negative effects. So really, I think it's really difficult to come up with any sort of standardized way to be able to put these on the market. The only thing I could probably think is to have a very in-depth filter and search function for a specific and separate market for Abyssal modules only. That's the only way it would work.
So, how big is the Abyssal market, at least from what you've seen in your own Discord? Do you have any estimation of just how much money goes through your Discord, for example, in a month, trading these Abyssal modules?
The simple answer is I don't know on both counts, but I think you probably want a bit more than that. So I think there's some really complex market and social structures that combine in this little corner of Eve. So the situation is kind of a paradox, because if we knew the answer to these questions, CCP would have created the equipment for us to know these answers. We'd have data gathering stuff, and in that case, we wouldn't exist. So a huge proportion of these trades are done in private conversations, private contracts, right? And this is something we kind of encourage within the Abyssal trading community. simply because, well, there's a few reasons. People don't like paying tax, right? So public markets is very difficult for high-end modules. I guess another thing is everything is negotiable, right? I know very few people who pay asking price for these modules. And if they were to go on public contracts, people would have to take the contract down anyway once a final price is negotiated. So something like we call them like a god roll, basically, which is something that is just insanely valuable. It's really invaluable. They're very rarely on public contract because, as I said, discretion is quite a large part of the culture of trading these things. The Discord caters to a lot of kind of high-profile PvPers and guys with very deep pockets, and they don't want people. They don't want people knowing their fits. They don't want people knowing what weapons they have. I'm not talking like turrets or stuff like that, but the maxed out shield booster or the insane officer rolled damage mods that they've got. And they don't want people to know what kind of ISK they're dropping on their fits as well. So it's really important to us that we keep a lot of this stuff, like I said, discretionary. Which is why we don't have a lot of data on any of this market stuff. The Muta plasmid.space site, right, has a lot of data about public contracts, but there's no data on private contracts there. I'd also say like the majority of high ticket items are not on public contracts. So you've got a huge proportion of modules with data being gathered on muta.space, but it's not representative because the value of the market, what those modules are worth in comparison to private trades, could be tiny, just sheerly because some of these god rolls of these modules can be worth more than the entire public contract market of one category.
Wow, I had no idea that Abyssals were such a huge kind of shadow market.
It really is, and there's we've got to take into account as well the stuff we don't see. So like guys in large null blocks who sell internally, I'm sure that Goonswarm and PanFam and all these guys have their own internal Abyssal markets, and these are the guys who own the base mods as well. These are the guys who have hangers full of dead space officer stuff that when they roll, they're going to get real good results. I do have some data though. So like these are I got from Sharad, who's the guy who runs mutaplasmid.space. And there's over 107,000 public contracts have been made with these things already. That's the full amount, over 107,000, which is like 265,000 modules rolled, like 600 modules a day or something. Yeah, I mean, it equates to about one module every 3 seconds from the maths that I've sort of done on it. I probably should touch on the fact as well that the Abyssal market actually extends beyond Abyssal modules as well. So all of these modules require a base module, right? So the dead space market, I don't know if you've noticed, or the dead space market has gone absolutely insane since these abyssal modules came out. I think like an example is the A-type 50 mn micro warp drives. They run now like 700 or 800 mil, and that was not the case before Into the Abyss dropped.
100, 400, if I remember correctly, right?
That sounds about right, yeah.
So there is a lot of economic impacts from this whole thing then. Given that, how much of the Abyssal market in that case do you think is driven by consumers, so the people who are actually using those items, versus speculators, people who want to try and make a profit from selling the items on later? I'm curious if you think that like maybe the Abyssal market could be a bubble or anything like that.
So back in September, I put out a short survey to the Discord. The sample size was fairly small, but the questions asked were quite fundamental to how the market is looking and how it's operating at the moment. So back in September, I hope, I like to think that this is growing, but back in September, there was about, what have I got here? So roughly 50% of the people who answered that survey roll and speculate. So they roll modules and they buy and sell. But interestingly, only 6% exclusively speculate. And then there was a number of 12% of members of our Discord, at least, buy only, which is tiny in comparison.
That is a relatively small percentage of the market, but that's still somewhat high when you're considering the prices of some of these modules.
Definitely. I mean, for a healthy marketplace, 12% is not big enough, and it's something that we have been working at Abyssal Trading anyway, been working really, really hard to improve on that. I'm currently working on a couple of big sort of marketing promotion stuff to get buyers into our Discord so that they can see the availability of this stuff. And it's grown slightly since September. I think we're about 17% now, which is good. It's slow, it's steady growth, which is okay. But we really, for a healthy marketplace, to avoid that bubble that you mentioned, we need people to be buying these modules and to be using them.
A lot of the times they've got to know where they can buy them in the first place. That was the big problem that you mentioned right at the start.
Exactly, it's awareness, and that's the main, that's the cornerstone of any service or product is awareness, essentially.
What are some of the baseline, like, common things that are sold or rolled onto the Abyssal market? If I'm not some rich guy, I haven't got like 200 billion ISK to drop, what are some things that I might be able to see and use in my average PvP fit that's going to benefit me?
So in terms of what's rolled most, stasis webs are like by far the most popular module for people to roll and sell. I think probably next to that, so I'm actually just looking at the statistics page of mutaplasmid.space. So next to that, there's disruptors. Obviously, to get that range increase is a massive advantage if you're a PvPer. And then after that, it's damage modules, all the way from radiation sinks to gyros. The next 6 categories are all damage modules, are all the next big items that are rolled.
Those modules tend to have quite a high base price, though, if I remember correctly, because those are normally based on their faction variants being rolled. So your things like your True Satchel Webs, your Republic Fleet points, your Imperial Navy heat sinks. What can I be looking at if I'm looking at, more of a mid-range thing to improve my ship, but without breaking the bank? What can I get in that regard?
Okay, so the mid-range market is something within the larger market that really we do want to improve on. So within that sort of realm, you'd be looking for stuff that has really improved on one stat, but maybe not so much on another one. And you could essentially say that if it's been bricked on one stat, which means it's had the biggest penalty applied to it, or a substantial penalty applied to it, you can look for those kind of modules. Because although you may have taken a big hit to the power grid usage, you might have some spare power grid on your ship, and you can still fit and you can still get that extended range on the web, or the increased rep power on your armor repper. And all you have to do is just do what we call jigsaw that into your fit. But also in the mid-range market, I would say a lot of T2 stuff could probably come into there as well. Maybe some T2 modules that have been rolled with lower end plasmids as well. Maybe a good roll on a gravid can still go into the high end market, but an average roll on a gravid really is mid-range. But obviously in EVE, everything's about having that edge. In terms of PvP, this mid-range stuff is really, really great.
In some ways, to me, it almost seems like a cheaper but slightly more awkward way of getting a faction power level module.
Exactly. And, the trouble we're really having right now with this mid-range market, because personally, I think the mid-range market is fantastic. I've got T2 gravid rolled stuff on almost all of my ships. I don't really roll to sell, so that stuff will just go straight on my ships. But the trouble we're really having with it is that there isn't enough interest in the mid-range market to warrant the rollers and the speculators investing into it. But for a healthy Abyssal marketplace, it's essential, as I said, to avoid the bubble.
Do you think it could ever be possible for an alliance or a coalition to run a fit that uses Abyssal modules as a standard part of that fitting? I know in the distant past that people used to say that about dead space modules or standardized implants and drugs, so I'm curious to see what your thoughts are there. Do you think at some point in the very future we might see these things, the advantages that they offer, start to weed their way up into the bigger N+1 groups, as most things have in the past?
I mean, never say never, right? I thought a lot about this, and it drew me to a situation that we had not too long ago, which was a guy came into the Abyssal Trading Discord and he asked for 2 identical modules, right? And we were all scratching our heads as to why you'd want 2 identical modules, right? But that's beside the point, because he told us the parameters of the module and what his fitting requirements were, and the what the role had to be like, which was cool. And we're looking at this module, the stats of this module, and we're thinking, okay, well, that's a fairly standard requirement. There's nothing special about this. It's like, the value of something like this isn't massive, right? But at the point where you want two that are the same, that value just absolutely skyrockets, because the chances of getting two exactly the same, of getting twin modules, are just astronomical. So the single module on its own was probably about 300 mil, roughly. But together, I mean, you're talking billions just for that second module. Now, I know that's not the question you're asking, having two identical modules, or a bunch of identical modules for doctrine style ships. But the scale of the economy on something like that is really, really difficult to obtain. I don't think any. I mean, it's hard to say, because yes, an alliance may use them, but what's the size of their fleet? So I think if large doctrine style forces wanted to start using Abyssal stuff, they are going to need to make some concessions, maybe, in their fits to be able to fit these things. They're going to need to be given more leeway on their fitting, definitely, or focus on an aspect of the fit and the module that is binary. So fitting usage, CPU, power grid, either something fits or it doesn't. Being below a certain level means it fits, being above it doesn't. And then they just buy everything that's below that certain level with an increase on the stat that they need, be it shield hit points or whatever it is. And that's the only way I can really see it happening. Like I said, never say never, right? I mean, people are doing crazy stuff with Python every day.
Appreciate your perspective there. So I gotta ask one question that I'm sure you were very much expecting to get, and that's simply, what's the most expensive Abyssal item that you've ever seen?
I say we have a Hall of Fame within our Discord, which is basically all of the top modules that have ever come through our community. There's some pretty stringent process to get into that Hall of Fame. There can only be one module of any type in there at any one time. If another one wants to take that spot, they have to go through sort of a polling process with the community. And to even get to that polling process, the module has to be community approved. I mean, there is some seriously high-end stuff in there. But in terms of the most expensive module I've heard of being sold is, I think it was a micro warp drive. Somebody paid 25 billion for a micro warp drive.
I bet that went very fast.
I don't know how fast it went. I just know that that's what was paid. I mean, like I said, a lot of this stuff is really kept quiet of how much and what modules and who's buying them. But obviously, that one was sort of sent my way, that information.
Well, I will definitely make sure to leave a link in the description below for people to come and check out this Discord if they are interested in either buying items or trying to sell their own. But before we go, do you have any tips for people who are looking to start creating their own Abyssal items? What are some good things to start with? Is there any quote-unquote guaranteed profit to be had?
There is no guaranteed profit to be had. I should probably say that straight away. Do it for fun. It's extremely difficult to make ISK rolling modules. We're at a point now within the market where the supply is comfortably keeping up with the demand. And at that scale, it's easier to buy what you want and fairly straightforward to find it. If you want to roll you please do it responsibly. Okay, these are loot boxes. They are designed to be addictive, right? So that you can't help but buy some Plex from CCP so you can roll a few more modules. I've seen a lot of cases of like rollers regret, and it's not a good look. So if you want to give it a go, if you want to like try it out, go for some T2 modules and some cheap plasmids and just have a bit of fun.
Thank you very much for coming along and answering my questions. Do you have any final things you'd like to say to the audience?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything. Thanks for having me along.
No worries. Take care out there, and I will see you in space.
Cheers.
A special thanks, as always, goes out to our Crassuses, Pinche Infidel from Old School, Brood from Triumvirate, and Zolka Lando, as well as to our other $5 patrons in Dustin Prater, Meeks, Czar, Olav Olden, Kem, Raphael, Big Bada Boom, Dunk Dinkle, and the Ashfell Foundation. If you want to support the channel yourself, you can either check out the Patreon link in the description below with many sweet benefits for you, or if you'd like, just share the video with some other people who you think might enjoy it, as word of mouth is the best way to help the channel grow. Until next time, have a good day and fly smart.